Today, an interesting question from the Saints subreddit. Is it even possible for Kellen Moore to fail? Great question, actually. Something we've talked about before on the channel, but I want to talk about it more now that the regular season is upon us. What does it mean for Kellen Moore to fail? And also, what does it mean for him to succeed? These are important kind of barometers for success or failure or whatever we need to lay out there. So I want you to put in the comments below what you think. What would be an abject failure for Kellen Moore, and what would be a success? I think a success would be, well, let's start with the fail. The only way I think Kellen Moore can truly fail in season 1, and I don't know if he could get fired or any of that stuff, but just straight up failure. Just looking at the season and being like, all right, this was a disaster, this was a mess, whatever. If the two coaches who I would point to who failed, even regardless of the record, even though the record was terrible, was Nathaniel Hackett and Urban Meyer. Both failed for very different reasons. Nathaniel Hackett failed because he could not do the job. He could not manage the game. He could not call timeouts. He couldn't even, I don't know if y'all remember the Nathaniel Hackett experience, but to give y'all a really brief synopsis, he was an offensive coordinator in Green Bay. He was Aaron Rodgers' OC. All right, he was kind of like the Pete Carmichael of Green Bay. Then he goes to Denver and can't even get plays in. Like, he's calling plays, he's running, the play clock is expiring, he's butchering timeouts, he's butchering the end of game stuff, and it was very obvious that he was just an offensive guy who was a film room guy who didn't want to be calling plays, didn't want to be managing the clock, didn't want to be managing the defense, didn't want to be managing the logistical side of coaching. He flat out could not be a head coach. Urban Meyer, his personality and how he approached coaching was a disaster. Urban Meyer was much more of a coach, I guess, much more of an X's and O's coach than Nathaniel Hackett. He just didn't treat the NFL job like the NFL job. I remember there were stories of him not knowing players on the other team. He didn't know who they were when he should have been game planning for them. He famously took a personal flight, or he stayed. The team flew back home. He stayed or flew somewhere else to visit his family. It was just insane. He was treating it like a high school coaching job, not like an NFL coaching job. Those are the ways that I think Kellen Moore those are the only ways I could see him failing, is if he somehow fell into one of those buckets where week 1 rolls up, he's blowing timeouts, he can't get plays in, he's overwhelmed, the team is struggling, all that. And I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's already proved that can't happen. The personality thing, I think he's already proved that's not going to happen. All right. So those two like rock bottom disaster examples, I think we're clear of. So what would actually be a realistic failure? I think a realistic failure would be if we take a step backwards, especially offensively, because Kellen is an offensive guy. So if we are the worst offense in the NFL, because remember, even as bad as the Saints were last year in DVOA, PFF metrics, we were never last. We were always like 25th, 21st, 26th, but we were never 32nd. If we are 32nd in those rankings and DVOA and yards per play and those kind of numbers, and we can't get first downs, we can't score specifically if we can't score in the first half of games or the first drive of games, if things like that are happening and we are a 1, 2, 3-ish win team because of that, and we're losing games 17-6, and our defense is pitching shutouts, and our defense is doing everything they can to keep us in the game. It's 9-0 going into the fourth quarter, and we just are begging for a touchdown. If that's happening, I think that could be considered a failure. If we are a 3-win team, 4-win team, 5-win team, but we look like we did this preseason, I don't think that's a failure. Because this preseason, even though we lost to the Chargers, even though we lost to the Broncos, we were competitive. We were in the game. We were moving the football. We were existing. We were relevant. The good things were happening. We just weren't putting together things at the end, but it is what it is. I think if you can see some of the positive trend lines, if you can see, all right, we're running the ball for 4+ yards to carry. We have 5.3 yards per play. Our opponent has 4.8 yards per play. We're winning the yards per play battle. We have more first downs. Oh, okay, we're throwing the ball around. We're scoring a little bit here. Like, if those things are happening and we're struggling in other areas, or the full picture just isn't there, I think that is still, or would be, a success. Now, I'm not going to celebrate 2 wins. I'm not going to celebrate 3 wins. And it's kind of difficult, honestly, for what I'm talking about is like the metrics of success. It's hard for those metrics of success to happen and us to win 1, 2, 3 games. I would put the number, I think our rock bottom floor is around that 5-win territory. I think the defense is good enough. I think our playmakers are good enough. I think our schedule is easy enough to where we can get in that 5-win world. And the more I look at everything, the more confident I am with our, and we're going to do another schedule, a final prediction. And I don't think it's going to change too much, because what we said months ago when we did the first schedule, where we ended up with 6 wins, we predicted 6-11. A lot of what we predicted, we saw in the preseason. A lot of, if Kelvin Banks can do this, and if our rookie class can do this, and we're going to be able to run the football with Alvin Kamara. Now, we haven't seen that per se. Shout out Thomas Keller. But a lot of that we have seen. So my view of this team is not much different than it was 2 months ago. Because a lot of the stuff that we thought we probably would see, we have seen. Specifically on the defense. We talked about Brandon Staley changing the defense and how it would make Brian Brzee and Chase Young, Carl Granderson much better. And I feel like it has. So let's go ahead and look at a little bit of what y'all are saying. What I mean is, we're all correctly giving Moore a ton of slack this season since he stepped into a terrible situation. So I guess I wonder, is there anything outside of personal conduct stuff that could get him fired? I feel like if we went 0-17, we could rationalize it not being his fault. And this is kind of what I'm saying too, where what has to happen? Think about how bad a team has to be 0-17. Think about the step backwards the Saints would have to take from last year to be 0-17. They were 5 wins last year, below average across the board. Now imagine taking such a step back. You go -5 in the win category, and you are 0-17. That is a huge number. I'm going to be very patient during the next few seasons, but I wonder what kind of basement floor we should require during these next few seasons. Not sure if it would get him fired, but if he loses the locker room, I'll be upset. Yeah, this is kind of what I'm saying. If you go 0-17, you're probably going to lose the locker room. But at the same time, that locker room just went 0-17. So it's are you really concerned with losing that locker room? No, you probably, if you're the front office, it's all right, we probably need to get rid of a lot of the people in this locker room if we just went 0-17. All right. And it's also we've already seen some of this. You know what I mean? The idea of losing the locker room. We've already seen the locker room go all in on Kellen in just a few months. That's a real metric that you can't, it's not going to show up in a box score. But the fact that Kellen's only been there for a few months, and DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, Chris Olave, whoever's on interviews, are waxing poetic about Kellen Moore. They didn't do that with Dennis Allen. So even if things are hard, even if the Saints start 0-4 or 1-5 or 2-6 or whatever, I don't think he's going to lose the locker room, because I don't think that's who he is as a person, who he seems to be as a leader. I think the fact that Moore was a player not long ago, even a journeyman, helps him bond better with the players. True. The way he ran camp was also interesting, having day offs. Day off instead of off days is wild. Days where they went bowling, team bonding, doing charity, and still when it's practice time, all the media was impressed by how much work he was able to squeeze into a few hours of practice. True. Let's see. Exactly what I was losing the locker room is what didn't sound fired, sort of, kinda. Depends on the attitude of the team. If they go 0-17 and the team is still bought in, he's going to get another try at it. I don't think the record, and I say this all the time, the record is not like how he says what the original poster says, what kind of basement floor should we require? I don't think the answer is a record. I don't think the answer to the basement floor is 2-15 or 3 wins or 5 wins or whatever. It's more of these trend lines. It's more of what's the yards per play. What do we rank DVOA? How are we playing these games? Are we competitive in these games? How does the offense look? Can we run the football? How many points are we scoring? Like, all of that is way more important than 4 wins versus 6 wins. So I don't think Kellen, y'all know where I stand on Kellen Moore. I love him like a brother. I think he's going to be the greatest coach in Saints history. I think this team, so much of this team hinges on a few positions. Like, so much of this team hinges on the quarterback position. So much of this team hinges on the interior offensive line. So much of this team hinges on Alvin Kamara and the ability to run the football. And a lot of that we just flat out haven't seen yet. A lot of that we just don't have the answers to. But 3 preseason games in, it is hard for me to see this team taking a dramatic step backwards with how much better the roster is and how much better the coaching staff is. And you may say, what do you mean how much better the roster is? All the people returning from injury, Eric McCoy, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, all of them returning. The 9 draft picks, and even if you don't say all 9 of them, just Danny Stutzman, just Kelvin Banks, just Quincy Riley, just Jonas Senker. Like, those guys who we've seen in preseason who were insane. Like, just them coming in. And that's not even counting Justin Reed, right? That's not even counting Brandon Staley and how he's changing the defense and what that means for Brian Brzee. So the roster is so much better than last year. And then the coaching staff is a huge upgrade. Huge upgrade. Going from Dennis Allen, Joe Woods, I like Clint Kubiak, but to Kellen Moore, Brandon Staley, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. So I don't think he can fail. I don't think he's going to fail. I'm excited to see what the regular season looks like because I'm excited to have some of those questions answered, like running the football, Alvin Kamara, some of that. I think the Saints against Arizona is going to look very different than the Saints versus Denver and versus the Chargers and even versus the Jaguars. I think you're going to see way more success running the football. I think you're going to see a very different playbook. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Saints played really well against Arizona. Now, San Francisco, Seattle on the road, Buffalo on the road, tough, right? But I would not be surprised one bit if we came out there and looked pretty good against Arizona. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me know in the comments below. Interesting conversation. Do you think Kellen Moore can fail? What would be the failure? What do you think is the true failure? And don't say 7 wins. Don't say 6 wins, because that's not a failure. Don't say anything besides making the playoffs is a failure, because that's not true. So what would have to happen this year where you looked at Kellen Moore and you're like, I don't know if he's the guy? Ladies and gentlemen, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.